So good evening to all, salams, and welcome to all of you. This is our third session of the In Conversation series. It's funded by the Government of Canada, and we are so happy that we could have a lineup of great speakers who are experts, researchers, and really working in the field of digital hate, online hate. And really, this is the goal of this campaign, which comprises 6 episodes, is actually to bring awareness to the issue of cyber hate, digital hate. And we do see we have a lot of data, we have a lot of stats that shows that young women, especially racialized women, and our 2S LGBTQ communities are really, really at high risk of online hate. They are doxxed, trolled, abused, receiving threats. And really, sometimes people shy away from this digital space and they want to walk away. And this series is actually a way to let us know how we can all come together to counter this hate and work together. So I would like to kind of pass it on to my colleague Iman to do the land acknowledgements.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I would like to acknowledge the land that we're on today. This land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on this territory. Thank you.
Thank you, Iman. And I just wanted to kind of go through our format. So, we are going to meet with our guests today. We are going to have a candid, informal conversation. And at the end of it, we are going to open it up to Q&As. You can post these questions in the chat, or you can open up your mics and ask the questions. And I'd also like to introduce our very, very fabulous moderator. So this is our third session. And we are so happy to have Fatima Sayed with us. Fatima, thank you for agreeing to do this series for us at such short notice, and you're doing a wonderful job. Just wanted to introduce Fatima. She's a Mississauga-based journalist with a Narwhal, an online publication that offers in-depth coverage of environmental and energy issues across Canada. Fatima has worked and written for many publications, including the Toronto Star, National Observer, the Guardian, and the Chatelaine. So, Fatima, I'd like to hand it over to you and to take this along. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those, and assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good evening. Hope everyone's having a lovely, hope everyone had a chance to go outside today because it was lovely. This is, as Firdaus mentioned, my third session. For those of you who've been around for all three of them, it's been a really nice narrative that we've been building every single session. So the first one, we actually understood hate policy and the need for it and how hate sort of exists in these spaces. In the second one, which was last week, was honestly one of the greatest conversations I think I've had, just because we all were on something. We were all just like feeling our feels and really opened up about everything. And we spoke about how youth engage with the online space and how we can, how they navigate it and what their challenges are, and so forth. And today we're going to talk about the social media platforms themselves, which I'm really excited about because it's a huge part of the narrative. And we can't really figure out how to change things if we don't have all the players around the table. And in this case, having the platforms around the table is a huge and very important thing. So I want to introduce our panelists today. It's Erin Taylor. She's a public policy and communications leader with 15 years of experience working in tech and industry innovating brands. She's Meta Canada's public policy programs manager, where she works closely with people at national organizations, nonprofits, in academia, and across all levels of government to develop meaningful initiatives that benefit Canadians. Erin and I spoke about this earlier, how she's seen firsthand how digital empowerment and education plays a critical role in unlocking forums for expression, storytelling, and culture sharing. Really excited to have you here, Erin. Welcome.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much. It's such an honor and pleasure to join you all this evening. Thank you for inviting me and welcoming me into your discussions. I had the pleasure of joining the session with Dr. Barbara Perry, who's actually a close partner And I know that, and as well, close partner with Jolyn from YWCA. So you've had such an amazing lineup, and I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to join here this evening.
Yeah, and I know the crowd's gonna have tons of questions for you, but let's try and frame the conversation first before we get to it. I guess the first thing is, I think, Erin and I talked about this earlier. We're both millennials and we've both seen social media and digital usage evolve over the years. And I wondered if you could speak first about, how Meta has seen this evolve over the years, because the main criticism that I hear quite a lot, both as a journalist and user of social media, is that platforms aren't doing enough to keep users safe. But I also recognize that this is a conversation that only started a few years ago. And I wonder if you could shed some light on what the narrative and the discourse has been like from your end and how you've seen it evolve.
Yeah, there's lots to talk about here. But yeah, we were talking about in our kind of pre-discussion just how much the internet has changed. And I think society has changed a lot. The internet has changed a lot. People are much more connected than they ever have been before. And like you mentioned, and like I have shared, there are a lot of great things that come along with that. I think there's a greater collective consciousness around social issues, mental health, body diversity. I've also seen in my role and working with Meta for the past 5 years, and prior to that, I was with PayPal, I've seen firsthand the incredible benefits of the internet for underrepresented and marginalized voices, whether that's an Indigenous entrepreneur making a living selling traditional handmade items on Facebook Marketplace, or community food bank raising funds. But of course, the parts of society that are not new, like hate and racism, eventually find their way into these online spaces. And the challenge becomes, how do we deal with these age-old issues in these new contexts? And what are the ways that they end up manifesting in these new spaces? And we're going to dig more into it. But speaking for Meta, we want people to feel safe using our products and services. And we know that people want to be online. They want to use these tools and products and services to connect with their family, to connect with friends, messaging your family on WhatsApp, or connecting with a mom group on Facebook. I'm a new mom, so that's been an important channel for me. But we know that people don't feel safe to do that, if to fully express themselves, to share their full identity, and don't get to have the full benefit of what these platforms can mean for people if they don't feel safe to do so. And so that's where this intersection of our work comes in, where it's working with industry experts, researchers like Dr. Barbara Perry, global experts. We're one of the only social media companies. I think we're the only social media company with a dedicated civil rights team who work ensuring that we're approaching our products and community standard development with a global lens and global understanding of these like nuanced and complex issues. And then working with partners to think about, not only in complement to the tools and the policies we have in place on our platform, but like you were mentioning, how do we elevate our collective digital citizenship? How do we help? And really the goal of this conversation series is, how do we help people be able to operate in these spaces in ways that serve them, work for them, and help us all create an online space that we want to be in.
That's really interesting. And I guess, the obvious follow-up is, how do we do that? Because this is not a new conversation anymore. We've had it so many times, and there are way too many examples in the Muslim community and many other racialized communities and marginalized communities of instances where, they have posted something or they've received something and then just haven't had the most robust or constructive or productive response from the social media platform in and of itself. So can you walk us through what measures Meta has actually sort of done to keep users safe from online hate?
Yeah, definitely. And I see you snacking there. You should definitely eat. It's like time for everyone to get their snacks in. And I know it's been a long day for you. But yes, I mean, I think the reality is that it is constantly evolving, and so we must also constantly evolve. Like we just talked about, social media, the way that we use internet has constantly evolved over the past 20 years. Facebook has now been around for 20 years. The way that people are using our platforms continues to change, and it is a constant and very proactive and dedicated effort that our teams have in place to try and understand what are these new contexts, what are these new challenges. I could go on probably forever about a number of the different specific examples, but it comes back for me to our products, policies, and partnerships. And so on the product side, it's enabling tools like hidden words. I don't know if folks are familiar with that, but we have really robust policies in place. We know though that like, let's say our hate speech policies don't necessarily cover all the terms or words that might be harmful for you. And everyone's going to have a different perspective of what and reaction to the words that are harmful to them. And so we have developed tools like hidden words, where you can choose what are the words that you do not want to see in your messages, in your DMs, in your comments. And so that way you're able to actually proactively filter that content, and so you are not exposed to it. That's one example. On our policy front, you might also, I don't know if you can hear, it's bath time for my little guy. So he's chiming into our conversation. But on our policies front, again, it's also continually evolving. And what are the right ways that we should be approaching these challenges? One example in Canada is, a derogatory word for Indigenous women. We've recently added it to our list of slurs, and that's based off of community feedback. And that's something that is also a constant and proactive process. And it takes time to build those relationships to be able to get that feedback. And then on the partnerships front, it's working with organizations like yours, like YWCA, like Media Smart, to put in place programs. We're working with youth to help them, like, how can they make sure that they're operating and sharing in these spaces? How can they be better digital allies? How can they use counter speech? Is that the right moment in time for them to actually be doing that? And making sure at the heart of all of that is people, and the people who are using their platform, our platforms. We want for them to feel good about the time they spend on these spaces.
Is there any sort of, I think, one of the things that's interesting about Meta particularly is you've got two big ones, right? You've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, where people spend a lot of time. And over the years, there have been a lot of criticism as well. We had revelations from Frances Haugen, the whistleblower, that showed that, Facebook was choosing profit over safety. And there have been many investigations along those lines that question Facebook's motivations here. And I hear you, like you're doing a lot of community engagement, you're making these attempts, but I think there's still a lot of skepticism, right? When you put those headlines and those investigations along with sort of what Meta officials like yourself and Meta official statements and stuff say. So I'm wondering if those, if Frances Haugen's revelations in particular, did that have an impact, and how you reconcile with the skepticism? Let's be real, we all think that, social media platforms aren't doing enough. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that So like I mentioned, this work has been, we've been around for 20 years. This work has been around and underway for 20 years. We've invested, millions of dollars in this work and in developing these products and tools and solutions. It is a constant evolution. And so as the conversations change, as the needs of society change, it is going to be something that is, I feel like we're always going to be doing our best to keep up with what those needs are. And I'd say that feedback, like the feedback you're sharing, the feedback we've certainly heard, and calls from, people like Frances Haugen, increase conversation around these issues, which I also think is a good thing. At Meta, we say feedback is a gift. And I think the more that we have a collective consciousness around what are these challenges, we have to understand them to overcome them. And so I think it's important that we have this kind of out front public dialogue around what are those challenges? What do people want? What do people want to see? What is like the ideal outcome for you? Saying, for us too, it's really helpful when people are like, these are the specific experiences that we as a community face. So we can understand how do we address what those are. And so I think, any kind of feedback I'd say is a gift and just helps keeping us on this path of trying to build better products and solutions that serve people. I also think that Meta is often at the forefront of these like very public discussions, but we're by no means the only social media platform on the internet. We're also not all of the internet. And I think what would be great to see as well is a broadening of our like that collective consciousness push around how do we do better across all social media platforms, and create industry-wide solutions that look at how do we make sure the bar is raised for everyone, not just on one platform, but across all of them.
I guess, again, that is encouraging, but I'm wondering, oftentimes I feel like a lot of this discussion puts the onus on the individual, on the user, right? Like, how are you navigating on social media? And I agree, like to some degree, said degree twice. To some degree, that is true. Like, how you are online is important and it matters, and civility matters. And last week we talked about posting with purpose, and heart speech, not hate speech, both of those slogans, which we are going to turn into t-shirts someday. But I also am wary of putting the onus on individuals and users, because at the end of the day, there's only so much we can do, right? Like, I don't post on Facebook or Instagram expecting to get hate. I don't post on anything expecting to get derogatory comments or so forth. And I'm doing everything in my power to use it in the way that I want. And yet still the responsibility is on me. The responsibility is on me to post properly. It's on me to report if I see something bad. And I wondered, what is Meta doing to take responsibility to do this? And we've heard you say a little bit about it now, but a lot of people are also walking away from social media platforms because of this. They just don't feel safe there. So how do you speak to those users who feel like it's all on them and that platforms don't really have their back?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to those folks to say that I think it's when, these tools aren't serving you, it's definitely good to take a break and take a pause and walk away. And that's something that we actively encourage people to do. We want for people to want to spend time. And so if that time on Facebook or, talking with folks or sharing on Facebook or Instagram or messaging on WhatsApp isn't serving you and you need to take a break, absolutely, you should do that. On the, we're not I think on, not enough action, and that the responsibility falls on the user or people. I think it's really, it needs to be a blend of both. And we have our community standards enforcement reports, which we release on a quarterly basis. And those are independently audited. And I would encourage folks to go and take a look at that and take a read through, and you can see, what is the prevalence of these kinds of issues and how are we proactively taking action on it. What we have these policies in place. We are developing tools to be able to proactively identify and often remove harmful content before it even reaches our platform when it's in violation of our policies. And so there's often content that never even makes it online. Or I know I've seen, something that's been grayed out and you can't see that post from the user, and there is that transparency there. So there is a lot of work that we are doing and that we do take onus on. It's not going to be perfect. I also think that, but it is certainly very significant. The proactive action that we're taking across hate speech, child exploitation, terrorism content, sharing of non-consensual images, things that often actually go beyond what our current laws in Canada even call for. And it's a complement. So it's all of that, and it's all of the work that our platform is doing, and how can we do it, which is where it's really that marriage of the policies and platform, and then also partnerships.
To that end, what do you want to see from online hate legislation, which for people who may not have heard, is coming out next week? Canadian government announced that yesterday. I do want to root this question in the context of what's happening at present day, right? Like, we are seeing very heightened political discourse over what's happening in Gaza, and a lot of members of the Muslim community and beyond are really engaging quite highly, on Instagram, on Facebook and other social media platforms. And we're seeing people get blocked for posting information. We're seeing people get blocked for posting videos, which are, of course, they are horrific, but that's sort of the content when you have an area that is being attacked in that way. So, with online hate legislation coming and the climate being as it is, what are you hoping will be in that legislation from Meta's perspective, and how are you hoping it will help facilitate a better space for discourse of all kinds, including when it's like this?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, we always welcome industry-wide approaches. So making sure that it's looking across platforms so that there is that consistency people can expect wherever they're engaging online. Of course, I'm just sharing on behalf of Meta here today. And, if we look at what was originally tabled, some of the key elements that were part of the online harm legislation were hate speech, child exploitation, terrorism content, sharing of non-consensual images. That is already all work that we have put in place. We are certainly by no means have we ever waited for regulation to dictate how we approach this work on our platform. And this is stuff where we're doing proactively and in consultation with those experts who look at what are these trends, not only on Meta, on social media platforms, but across the internet and around the world generally. And even some of our policies, for example, around hate speech or terrorism organizations. We designated Proud Boys as a terrorist organization and Faith Goldie as a hate figure before they were recognized as hate figures by the Canadian government. So we certainly do not wait for regulation for us to do the right thing. And I think, we're very proud of that work and that effort that is industry leading across social media platforms. And so I hope that the approach to the legislation will be an industry-wide approach and look at it from that perspective. Coming to the other part of your question, though, about what is happening in the Israel and Hamas war, I think that's a really great example as well about how quickly and nimbly social media platforms, responsible social media platforms like Meta, have to operate in these contexts. Obviously, Hamas is a designated terrorist organization. Underneath our policies, that means that we do not allow for the support or praise of that kind of content. However, we understand that people are coming to social media to speak out against, the atrocities and the loss of human life. And sometimes that means that sharing a post that is of a very horrific image is actually condemnation and not praise. And that's a very hard line to, get right, but also requires a very nuanced understanding of those issues. And I think you probably will have seen even a change in how that content is kind of being shared now across our platforms from early on in I think early October. You probably have seen yourself a big shift in the way that we're approaching that based off of that feedback, ensuring that people have that space for expression around these issues that are important to them. And I will also end on, I think that's important too, finding that balance between space for expression and then also keeping people safe is something that is a constant tension and thread. And I'm sure that, I think even now people are seeing, some of the challenge that we face constantly operating in these spaces.
Yeah, I don't envy the job that you guys have. It's a hard one. Because on the one hand, you do want to make a space where everyone is participating in and having that sort of public square feeling where everyone can gather and talk about things and enjoy things and laugh about things and so forth. But on the other hand, what do you do when someone just doesn't like what the other person is doing? And how do you deal with that? I was struck by what you said at the end, which is like it is a balancing act. And I wondered, like, has this sort of discourse taken a toll on you and your colleagues at Meta? Which I know is a weird question to ask, but like it's something that I think about because I'm on the receiving end. But as someone who's trying to solve the problem, are you sort of throwing paint at the wall and trying to see what works? Is it like a trial and error strategy? And do you feel the weight of, everyone just feeling like there's not enough that Meta has done or any social media company has done? And how do you grapple with that?
Yeah, my first gut reaction is that I feel like it makes us better people. I like, listening and talking with people from all walks of life across all, coast to coast to coast here in Canada. I feel deeply Canadian. I feel deeply grateful to have these deeply Canadian experiences and hear from folks about what is their experience. This is a part of their life. These are a part of our online lives. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn from everyone's unique experiences, their backgrounds, and how that ends up taking shape online. And then how can we help make sure we try and get it right? And I think that, the team that I work with, and I'm really fortunate to work with, we all just want to try and get it as right as possible for as many folks as possible.
Your perspective has been so interesting to understand. One of the last things that I want to ask before I open it up to conversation with the audience, because I really do want them to have an opportunity to talk to you, is can you give us some positive impact that you've seen? I don't want to get like I understand there's challenges and we've touched on that a lot. I'm sure people are thinking about that as well. And I agree that we could keep talking about this in minutia detail. But are there any positive examples that you can give us of what has worked and what you've learned from that? And you know, something that we can take away as an example of how we can also help social media platforms do better.
Yeah, oh, so many. I mean, like I mentioned, I've really seen the positive impacts for people like primarily marginalized communities, people who typically don't have a very large share of voice in um, mainstream channels of discourse. I think it's amazing to see the diversity of the human experience on the internet and on Meta's platforms. You know, when I was actually just with the YWCA team and part of their Block Hate Advisory Council, and I was they had a resiliency roundtable with youth, you know, 16 to 26 at here in Toronto, and just hearing, you know, what are the things that these people are are using social media for, the diversity of their experiences, the breadth of their interests. There's something for everyone on Instagram, on Facebook, and I think that's always like keeps me really positive and is something hopeful. And I think like the community organization has always been something that's at the core of why I wanted to join Meta. Seeing how people come together, champion around causes, rally around issues they care about, and activate as community in community as community organizers to do good things. That also continues to just always be something that inspires me.
That's awesome. Yeah, it does seem like there seems to be a really strong bridge, you know, based on how you've described your work between the social media company and communities. So I guess our takeaway is that maybe bothering social media companies isn't a bad thing, and we shouldn't feel guilty about hitting the report button because
No,
it
you
helps.
should. That's what the report button is for. Like, you should report everything that you think violates our community standards, or if you just don't like it. And if you also don't like it, block it, mute it, unfollow. That's what all these tools are there for. And I've used them myself. I'm like, you know, I work at this company. I've used these tools myself, and because that's what they're there for. It's like not
Um,
using the like turn signal on your car, you know. Of course you should use it.
I'm going to open it up to questions. If you have any, please do raise your hand. And while we wait for people to gather their thoughts, maybe I'll shoot you off with one that just came to me. Is today was a big day because of the London terror attack decision by the courts, finding that it was a terrorist attack. Um, you know, that was a situation that played out on Facebook. Again, I remember the discourse around it, which is like, should Facebook have not allowed that live stream? You know, was there a way to get Facebook to maybe, you know, limit the person's interactions and postings and so forth? And I wondered if, you know, there have been a couple of these, both like worldwide, where you know there have been decisions that have highlighted how social media has played a major role in these sort of cases. Um, I wondered if we could get your thoughts on that and how you're as a company are grappling with cases like that and what you're thinking now after the fact, after those decisions, what changes need to be made or what the lessons learned are, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, you know, thinking of the families and community impacted by this, and I think, you know, it's we work there again. It's complicated. There are a lot of like complicated decisions that go into how we approach and treat these challenges. What I will share is that we do work very closely with law enforcement. So we have very proactive and open lines of communication with our CMP, with the, you know, local police services. And we receive like inbound requests from them constantly for review and assessment, and for requests for access to information on our platforms, which of course we comply with. And I think that is a really great example of how these offline experiences, like the offline hate examples, and how it bridges to the digital world, we need to work and enable that collaboration and that hand-in-hand collaboration. And the other thing that I'll share too is that you might not see it on the outside, but on the back end, it's like a duck sitting on water, and underneath the feet are pedaling very fast. When there are these real world events that happen, there are teams that very quickly come together across all like a great number of teams across Meta who are experts in this, having worked in various organizations outside of tech, and in the safety spaces, to assess, understand, triage, and then mitigate in line with our policies, and to ensure that there is to try and ensure that there is the least amount of harm, imminent real world harm possible. So it can look very serene on the outset, but the number of calls I've been on where there is an agonizing number of people poring over these extremely challenging issues, trying to understand what's happening and what do we need to do to make sure that there is no threat, there is a limited threat to real human life, is a massive effort.
Firdaus, I see you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Fatma. Actually, I have two. So I'm going to start off with the easy one and then maybe just come to the more difficult one. So Erin, in our membership, we do have, I know that Facebook is used by a lot of women who are older, maybe my age group. There's a comfort level with this social media space, or maybe it's, one of the older platforms that we have been using. So just some tips about, how basic tips where women or anybody using it, we're also concerned about our kids using this platform. How can we keep ourselves safe? So just to navigate us or go through some basic buttons to say, these are the things that you should definitely do before you even log on and start your account.
Yeah, of course. There are so many things, but I would say number one is enable two-factor authentication. That sounds very fancy, but it's really just like that extra block and layer of protection between someone else and your account. There are always going to be people out there who are trying to find a way to make a quick buck. I mean, I'm sure you've received telephone marketer calls, scam emails, texts. I get texts on a daily basis. At least for our products, you have the option of being able to put in place this two-factor authentication. So it means that if you by accident click on something you didn't mean to, a link that probably you shouldn't have, you have that extra layer of protection on your account. And that means that they can't get access to it, which can be extremely distressing. There's nothing that I'd want, I just know that it's extremely distressing. This is your life on Facebook. These are your pictures of your kids, these are pictures of your family. So set up your two-factor authentication as soon as you can. And then in terms of the context of this conversation, I would definitely recommend, we actually have still bath time out there. So I would say just familiarize yourself. We actually have a women's safety center. So we have a safety center. I should send the link in this chat. Go through the safety center. You can find anything that suits your particular vein of interest and needs. There's also a women's safety center, like we've mentioned and like we've talked about. Women in particular are a more vulnerable community in online spaces, and we understand those are unique challenges. But they're also, social media platforms are an amazing way to like build community, which I think is a major strength that women bring to the world. And so I would say, take a look at our Women's Safety Center. One of my favorite features, and I think again, really relevant to this conversation, is the hidden words. You can go on Facebook and Instagram, and I was just going to try and do it right now, but I'll focus on my conversation. And then you can choose words that you can choose all kinds of privacy and sensitivity settings. So if you don't want expletives, that's like a basic baseline. And then if there are specific words that are harmful to you, and that you do not want to see in your messages and your comments and the content that appears in your feed, you can choose to select that there. So those are kind of the 3 call outs that I would share with this community.
Great. Thank you, Erin. And just my second question is, maybe social media companies started off with, trying to connect people, but I think over the years it has evolved and there is so much usage. You mentioned marketplace and, different things. But I look at, Facebook and different social media platforms where actually we rally, we advocate. A lot of campaigns, as you know, have gone from grassroots on the ground campaigns to online campaigns, and they're very successful. I'm talking in particular to one incident where in 2020 we had the farmers movement in India. I'm from India, and we always look at Facebook to get to know what's happening in our home country sometimes. And with that agitation, as it was called, the farmers movement, they were protesting against a bill that was harmful to them. We saw that, the only way that they could mobilize was through the Facebook. So they had a Facebook page. But sometimes, these kind of platforms tend to get to be government mouthpieces. So we saw the Facebook page taken off, and then there was a huge social media outrage, outcry, and then after a couple of hours, the page was restored. So in instances like this, just maybe your comments on it, and if you have internal conflicts, so let's say you're not agreeing with what's happening or what Facebook is doing, how do you cope, how do you handle, and how do you advocate for something that is right?
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect example of that tension that Fatma and I talked about, where, yes, these platforms can be such incredibly powerful channels. And then how do we, for expression, for community gathering, for mobilization around issues that I know, actually at the YWCA event, there was a woman there whose family were farmers back in India, and she was like, I couldn't believe, and I was so happy to see that this was something that was like on all of our minds, and there was this global movement around these issues. And then of course we have to comply with government requests, and then there is us who's kind of put in the middle of that challenge, where it's like, this is a platform where people are meant to be mobilizing and communicating and sharing around these important issues. We also have a duty and a burden of care to meet the demands of, the imminent harm and real world safety. And what is that balance between the two? And how do we also take into factor those, government requests or higher level authority input, and then trying to make sure that we figure out the right place in the middle. And ultimately, not everyone's going to be happy, which is really hard. But we have to try and do the most principled thing based off of those like policies that work with experts. And that's another example of the duck on the water, where it might have seemed quite placid from the out front, but the underneath was a hive of activity, and trying to understand how do we best respond and support in this situation.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I guess we didn't talk about this, but it's sort of a perfect segue, which is the issue of misinformation, right? I think one of the things that has been said a lot about social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram included, is that it sort of creates these silos. And I think you see that on Facebook more than anywhere, where people just join these groups, and then, the content shared in that group and so forth, it is sort of almost a self-fulfilling perspective where you're just seeing your perspective and not being challenged about it, whether that's right or wrong. And I know Facebook has made moves to offer, those little blurbs like this is old, this is an old article, or this is inaccurate, or fact checks and so forth. I've seen that, but I wonder if you can speak to misinformation, again, because of how much we're seeing it more in the current climate, and how you're handling it today.
Yeah, and it's not just echo chambers are not just on Meta's platforms, they're everywhere. And like across, all the different channels in which people communicate. But how I think, Meta is doing a lot on the misinformation front. We have a global network of third-party fact checkers, like you mentioned. When we see you can report. This is another great thing you can do, and please do it. Report content as being misinformation. It will be queued and reviewed by those independent third-party fact checkers. Essentially what they do is they take a look at the issue, and then whether it's an image, text, video, a news article, whatever it is, they'll review it. And then next time that you see it in like on your feed, it'll say, it'll provide more context. They'll say, this is partially false. This is true. This is false, and give you a link to a corrected article with more information about it. I don't know any other platform that's doing that. This was something we also was like such a massive effort, especially during COVID. It was so quickly evolving. There's so much information, and then what is the right information, and who are those authoritative sources? And our goal is always to make sure that we're connecting Canadians with the authoritative sources of information. For example, we ensured that we were linking through to anything that would talk about COVID. Just automatically would have a link to the Public Health Agency of Canada's website, where you can learn more about what the real facts are from that source of authority. And so I think it's yet again another example of a constantly evolving challenge, and another example of this product and policy and mirroring with our partnerships. So in addition to those efforts on our platform, we also work with organizations like Media Smarts to ensure that people are equipped to be able to ask those questions. Do I trust this? Should I do a parallel check? What are those critical digital literacy skills that people need to have so that they can make sure they're not inadvertently sharing something that they shouldn't, but that they're also aware of the context and the information that they're seeing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are there any other questions? And feel free to think about it, because I can just keep going. This is why you get a journalist to moderate these things. But I do encourage people to ask your burning questions. There is no such thing as a dumb question. So whatever you're thinking of, let Erin know. You know, we talked about echo chambers just now. Can we talk about WhatsApp? I don't know if you can talk about WhatsApp, but I have concerns about WhatsApp. I'm sure a lot of people have concerns about WhatsApp, which is like, again, how does information flow from group chat to group chat to group chat, and then you see it like forwarded a million times, and there's no sort of fact checking basis. And I know we get into privacy issues here because these are people's personal messages and so forth. But can you talk to us a little bit about the tensions between maintaining the privacy of WhatsApp and also ensuring that it doesn't become an echo chamber in its own right?
Yeah. Yes, and WhatsApp is, such an amazing platform for that, ensuring there is that really heightened level of privacy and security in your communication. And I think it's the same way we approach it across like all of our platforms. There are certain signals that we look for. This is again more example of that back end that you don't see on the day-to-day, but we have teams in place who are understanding what are kind of those like broader trends. Are there things that are being shared repeatedly and very often, and around what kinds of issues? And what are they, and what do we need to understand about that? And then how do we like make sure that if it's someone who like a coordinated network, for example, that's putting out this disinformation, what are the friction points that we put in place on their account? And then if there is repeated bad behavior, what are those steps look like too? So if someone's repeatedly sharing something that they shouldn't be sharing that goes against our community standards, they would get a notification. We have ways that are limiting your ability to monetize, your ability to live stream, your ability to post and comment, and to a varying degree. And then eventually, if there's just this, we call it recidivism, if it's like, look, we've tried to give you lots of chances. We thought you were sharing this in good faith. We told you that, kind of going up against our policies here, and then you continue to do that, then you could find yourself suspended from use on our platforms. And that's something that can happen too. So that's a lot of the friction that we put in place behind the scenes that you might not see on the day-to-day, but is constantly working to try and make sure that we're have those guardrails in place.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And also another tough thing you have to grapple with. We've got two questions from Ola. So the first one is, what is the fine line between bullying on social media and potentially someone actually harming you, especially for girls and women? Like, do you actually have a distinction in your policy?
Yeah, bullying and harassment is really difficult, and obviously something that we do not allow for and support. And I think it's hard because it's, again, comes down to like what works, for what is going to cause you harm is going to maybe look a little bit different than what's going to cause other people harm. Some of the things that we're trying to address, like especially for youth mental health and youth well-being, a couple of the things are to try and protect them in these spaces as much as possible. Is, if you're creating new account, anyone under 16, so you have to be 13. And because we have really strong authenticity policies, you have to be a real person. And I know even cases where people have been like social justice leaders who are younger than 13, and they have to have their parents manage their account because they kept on having their account taken down because we could tell you're under our policy, like you're under our age limits, and we can't allow you to continue operating on our platform because you go against our community standards. And so we have these guardrails in place where anyone who joins who's from 13 to 16, you're automatically going to be set in friends and family only mode. You will not be able to receive messages from anyone older than 19 years old. So you're making sure that the communication that you're having is genuinely with that friends and family or people who you're already friends with. And anyone older, unknown, sliding into your DMs as something that we have those protections in place to limit that. And there are a number of other things, but I think those are really some powerful tools to protect their safety. And bullying and harassment is something that happens across, in the schoolyards and offline too. And then it's, what are these new challenges of online spaces, and how do we make sure that we are trying to find ways to protect people as much as possible in these online spaces in this new context?
For sure. And in that vein, Ola also would like some insight into how best to report a case where you're being harassed online. Do you go to local police? Do you go to a human rights commission when you feel threatened on social media? Like, what is your advice here?
Yeah, I think it's all those channels. So if there is something that happens, and actually that's social media actually offers you a great amount of, I think a greater amount of like option for recourse against these actions. You know, if you're on the subway and someone says something to you, you know, utters a slur at you, there's probably very little you could do, even if you went to the police and said, hey, this person said this thing to me on the subway at this time. With social media, you have that digital footprint, and you have also, you know, it's a real person because of our on Meta's platforms, you know, it's a real person. It's because of our authenticity policy. So I would say there is, we work with law enforcement. So if you do go to law enforcement and you want to press charges against someone for something, we comply with requests for information to be able to, for the law enforcement to then follow the right kind of judicial process for that real world recourse. There is also a way for
sorry to interrupt, Erin, but what's the success rate of that? Like, how many do you have? Are you able to quantify that? Just because, again, it's one of those things where people are skeptical because of personal experiences, but is that something that's worked, and how often has it worked?
Yeah, I think that's probably best position for law enforcement, because then it's not just about our policies, it's about what is the law off of our platforms. And so, and like I mentioned, you know, our policies go well beyond what current hate speech policies allow for. And so there is that gray zone of lawful but awful that exists out there. And so I'd say that question is really for the law enforcement bodies. But there's also a tool where you can go and you can take screenshots of that content. You can take it then to that law enforcement body that you trust, or not, or you know, other sources, so the rights organizations, and then they can help you pursue that as well. Yeah, so I think those are kinds of if you want to pursue this off of our platforms, those are channels in which you can do that. And then on our own platforms, I would say, yes, reporting, and then take action. Not don't wait for us to get back to you. Block, mute, report, whatever it is that you need to do to make sure that you're preserving your own mental well-being in these spaces. Yes, I would say do all. Those are all the things you can do.
Awesome. Yeah. And then in a similar sort of theme, you know, we've got questions in here from Firdos about hacking and how to deal with users whose accounts have been hacked. And then a question from Doha about shadow banning and how she's been shadow banned a lot, and wondering if there's some sort of media bias against that. Wondered if you could speak to both those things as well.
Yes, of course. So hacking is something like we talked about. You know, people are always trying to find a way to extract something from you, whether that's that text message you get saying, you know, your Canada Post parcel arrived, click here to claim it, or trying to get access to your social media accounts. And that's why I called out that two-factor authentication. It is the most effective way to protect your account. It just makes sure that if anyone, you do click on something, or if someone does somehow manage to get your password, you'll be redirected to you. It'll be redirected to you to confirm, no, this is not me. I've received emails saying that, you know, someone's attempting to log personally. I've received emails, someone saying, trying to attempt to log in. Is this you? No, it's an effective method of protecting your accounts. If you do find yourself in that situation, I know it's extremely distressing. Again, through the Help Center, there is more information about how you can request support for those issues. Sometimes it can be a bit of a timely process, and you know, multiple steps could be involved to recover access fully. But that's the most effective way to do it, and we're trying to work as fast as those bad actors are working to get you back into your account safely. On shadow banning, So shadow banning is it's like not technical, it's really not a thing for us. It's not like a real thing. It is like society feels that it's a thing. It's not a term that we use internally. I think that what usually is happening here is when you're sharing content and it's perhaps not reaching as many people as you thought that it might reach, or you're not having the same kind of response to it as possible, as you believe is possible. And this really comes down to more a factor of like, is this the kind of content that people want to be engaging with? So, you post a picture of my son Theo, it gets more likes than if I were to post a selfie of myself. It's really about what is it that people want to be engaging with, and is that driving the kind of engagement that you expect to see? There may be, and more recently, it also depends on the kind of content. So if you're sharing something that is very now, we have policies in place where if it's overtly political, we are not actively promoting that kind of content, because we've heard from people they don't want to see that. They want their Instagram to be like DIY cat costumes and gardening or cooking or whatever it is that is of interest to you. People have told us they'd like to see less political content, probably for a lot of the reasons why we're here today. Political content can be very evocative and polarizing. And so that kind of content isn't as actively surfaced in people's feeds, and so could impact the overall engagement metrics that you are seeing.
But isn't that dangerous as well from the point of discourse? Because you're if society is moving to, collectively talk, or a big chunk of society is moving to collectively talk about something that is deemed political in your perspective, then shouldn't they be allowed to? I guess isn't then the biases of a few defining the experience of social media for the many in that respect?
Well, absolutely you can share, and you can talk about, within the confines of our community standards, you can talk about whatever you would like to talk about. And that's the beauty of it. But it just because you have speech doesn't mean you have reach. And that is a good thing for, I think, the other side of that. Like if you're thinking about political discourse, maybe on opposite end of the spectrum, of where your views may lie. It's making sure that there is that equal approach to political ideologies, and ensuring that people are seeing what they want to see in their feed. So in addition to, of course, having that policy in place, you can choose, if you want to see political content, you can actively go and choose, I'd like to see this content. And you can reinforce that by liking posts and commenting and sharing, and the same way you would with your family photos and your cat and dog photos. It's the same kind of system that helps encourage the access to things that people just telling us what you care about, what you want to see.
If there are no more, I see there's 2 more questions. Ola, I'm not going to bring up that question just because it is so specific. I hope that's
but
okay.
If it is an issue, I don't know. Hold on, let me see if I can see the comments. I'm happy to look at it after if you like.
We can help you with
there.
that perhaps after. And then I think for those, we talked about online hate legislation quite a bit. But if there's no more questions, I guess I'll end with, I really like this. We did this last week, which is something that's brought joy to you, being in the online space, because it is, like I know it's easy to focus on the dark parts because the dark parts are so difficult, and I understand that it's, you know, a working process and so forth. But I think we have to amplify that there is good in social media too, right? There is community and so forth. And last week we asked we did like a circle, what brought you joy online this week? And I wondered if you had a little something.
Yeah, that's I love that too. And I think that's so right. Like all of this needs to be weighted and balanced. I feel like the themes of this conversation have been like talent, like tension and balance, and like finding and defining spaces that work for you. Um, well, the greatest joy, I like again, I like we talked about too. I'm a older millennial. I've had my experience with the internet is having no internet, dial up, email, messenger, like messengering experiences, and then joining social media. Obviously, the greatest joy in my life is that I met my husband online. And so, like, and now we have been together for 10 years. We have built a life together. We have a son. So, that is like why I'm a technology optimist. I think it's part of my personal experience, not just because I met Sean, but like I had the benefit of seeing like all the great things that the internet can bring to us. And so yeah, that's the best thing I've ever found on the internet for sure. But to this week, I don't know. I think there's so many things. I really like I post pictures of like my family. And I posted picture of Sean and Theo, my son, reading together. And I know that people post things on like, people are like, oh, I want to get likes, I want comments or whatever. When I share photos like that on social media, I just share it because to me, that's like pure joy. And I don't really care who responds. I don't care, who likes it or, gives me a heart or whatever. I just like have so much love for that moment that I want to put it out into the world. And that also brings me lots of joy.
That's lovely. Do I have to go? I guess I should go because I went last week too. There's this woman on Instagram who has a tiny turtle that fits on the palm of her hand. His name is Fig, and she just puts like little cowboy hats on him or like little different hats and builds him a home and feeds him really tiny like leaves and stuff. And he's just so fun and cool, and I love him. He brings me joy in a lot of ways. Um, Thank you for this very extensive conversation, Erin. We threw a lot at you, and you were great for walking us through Meta's perspective. So thank you so much. I'm sure we all learned a lot. I definitely did. So I will pass it back to Firdaus.
Yes, thank you, Fatma, and thank you, Erin, as well. We're happy to know and learn that we have an ally at Facebook that we can reach out to. We definitely do a lot of campaigns, social media campaigns, paid, unpaid, and we kind of have our own struggles where we are blocked sometimes and we get some hateful messaging. So really good to know that there are ways that we can navigate, there are ways to maneuver around all of this. So thank you so much for, I think, a great conversation today. And we want to keep this going. And I just want Iman to put the slide up to say next week we are going to be back, and this will be our fourth of the sixth in conversation series. And this time we have Dr. Ahmed Al-Rawi. We've had a lot of women on this panel and on the show. So we're having a male researcher. He's with the Simon Fraser University, and he's going to talk to us about how pervasive the issue of digital hate can be and how it manifests itself on Muslims, especially on Muslim women. And something that he told me really caught my attention, where he says simple things like emojis can also be hateful. They can also be Islamophobic. So really, I'm wanting to learn more from him. And we haven't got confirmation yet, but we may have an online user who received hate from, the Muslim community. So it would be interesting if she can join us. But again, we are awaiting confirmation. So that episode is on February 29th. Yes, it's a leap year at 6 p.m. EST. So hopefully you can join. You can register for this episode on the website starting tomorrow. And I would like to end with the next slide that, CCMW is extremely active on social media. We have so many social media handles and channels. So if you haven't liked, subscribed, please do so. Iman, who is with us, is our great social media expert. She's posting a lot of things every day. And if there is something that you want to tag us on, please do so. And again, I thank all of you for attending today, for being such a good audience. And inshallah, hope to see all of you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Be well. Thank you.